And my theme is very simple, and I can encapsulate it in 2 words. Words matter. Words matter. When I hear people say, well, don't pay too much attention to what they say, they don't really mean it, my mind always goes back to my grandfather in Hamburg in 1932, 1933. He read Mein Kampf, and he took it seriously. And when many other Jews did not, saying, Hitler couldn't mean that wild, crazy stuff. My grandfather said, no, this is for real. And he gathered the children together, and he said, we are going to have to leave. I had dinner with my aunt last week, who lives in Paris now, and is a very big supporter, Dory, of Tel Aviv University, very big friend of Itamar Rabinowitz, and I said, just go over this for me. She was very young at the time, but I said, how did it work out? And he said, well, he sent the children out immediately, first to Switzerland and then to Buenos Aires. My family was fortunate. They had enough means to get out. But many other people who had the means or the ability to get out didn't, for the simplest reason. They didn't think Hitler really meant it. And of course, we all know what happened. Bad history leads to bad events. In the book that I wrote on the Bosnian negotiations, I addressed this. When I got first involved in Bosnia, the prevailing wisdom, most epitomized by the Secretary of State under George Bush Sr., Larry Eagleburger, was that these were ancient hatreds. Eagleburger, who had served as United States ambassador in Yugoslavia, had the audacity to say, we, the outside world, can do nothing about this until they are tired of killing each other. I work closely with Larry Eagleburger. I understand what a distinguished diplomat he is, but I don't think history should be very forgiving of a callous, cynical, and factually inaccurate statement such as that. He said, let them kill each other till they're worn out. We all know where that would have ended. When President Clinton took office, his Secretary of State, his first Secretary of State, said similar things, using phrases like ancient hatreds and the problem from hell. And it wasn't until the summer of 1995 that President Clinton belatedly got engaged. And when the U.S. engaged, we were able to stop the fighting, bring the parties to the table at Dayton, Ohio, behind a high barbed wire fence at Wright-Patterson Air Base, and force them to an agreement. That agreement was not perfect. I want to stress that to you. But it ended the war. It ended the genocide. To this day, parties on both sides, but particularly the Bosnian Muslims, are seeking justice through the International Court of Justice and through other means. And they should continue to do that. But the important thing was that the genocide was stopped. In Darfur today, the International Criminal Court has said that there are grounds to indict the president of Sudan, President Bashir. This is the article I wrote in yesterday's Financial Times, which I hope will be available to you by the end of this meeting. And now the members of the Security Council are talking about exercising their authority under the Rome Treaty, the treaty that set up the International Criminal Court. They're talking about using their authority to delay action for at least 12 months. In the article I wrote in yesterday's Financial Times, I strongly oppose that. On the simplest grounds, Bashir hasn't indicated that a delay would improve the situation, or that he would change his tactics. If somebody could come forward and say, give him 12 months and he'll stop it, we in the international community would have to consider it, even though it would be giving leeway to a war criminal, because lives that are still alive might But to give him an extension based on nothing, which is what China and Russia and some of the Europeans are now thinking about, just weakens the whole concept of the International Criminal Court. It weakens the concept of the Genocide Convention, and it weakens the pressure of the international community. If a person is guilty of genocide, that person should be held accountable for that, because words matter. And so we come, of course, to the issue of Iran. Dory Gold and his colleagues have done an absolutely brilliant job of bringing this to world attention. Now, because the Iranian nuclear program is the front edge of every news story, and because everyone takes for granted Ahmadinejad's odious statements about Israel, people haven't focused enough yet on the core underlying reason that Iran with a nuclear weapon is uniquely dangerous. I don't want Pakistan to have a bomb. They already have one. I certainly don't want North Korea to have a bomb. They have built 6 or 7 in the last few years. I don't want to see proliferation. But Iran is uniquely dangerous because of the specific threats they have issued to another country. Threats based on religion and ethnicity. Threats based absolutely clearly on genocide under its legal definition. I'm going to leave the legal discussions to the subsequent speakers. Gregory Gordon is going to be speaking, Dory will be speaking, and you have these fabulous books. But I do want to underscore that in 1948, a convention was passed, which the United States, by the way, ratified after a long 40-year delay. And the name of that convention was, we all call it the Genocide Convention, but I want to give you the full title of the Genocide Convention so you understand why we're here today. It is the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. These books that you have today point out that historically, genocide is only something that is discovered after it has happened. And then people go back and dig into the archives, as they're doing about Armenia still today, or about what happened during the Holocaust, or what happened in Darfur. But this convention is called Prevention and Punishment, and let's stress the word prevention right now. Then, in the last few years, the International Criminal Court was established. Unfortunately, the United States, under this administration, withdrew President Clinton's signature from the ICC convention, and therefore we are not a signatory to it. More importantly, Iran is not a signatory, and I must also note for the record that Israel is not a signatory. Nonetheless, it is a treaty in force, and a very important one. Subsequent speakers will explain to you how it can apply specifically to this case. Because under the Rome Treaty, that's the name of the treaty that established the International Criminal Court, under the Rome Treaty, there are provisions, particularly Article 25, subparagraph 3E, that clearly cover, explicitly cover, the Genocide Convention. So, what can we do about it? Ahmadinejad is in New York today speaking at the United Nations the same morning we're assembled here. There's nothing we can do to stop him speaking at the UN. It is a sacred and critical right that the United Nations be a forum even for the most odious people. And I have never supported those people who want to ban him from New York simply because we would damage ourselves. However, I do not think that it is wise to invite him to address other fora. As chairman of Asia Society, I'm chairman of a great organization headquartered in New York with a very strong regional presence here in Washington. We were offered a chance to have Ahmadinejad before Columbia University and before the Council on Foreign Relations 2 years ago. And we turned them down. And I want to explain why we turned them down. It is not because I'm afraid that Ahmadinejad's words would somehow change anyone's opinion here in the US. It's because he uses these forums to legitimize himself in Iran. And that's why Colombia was wrong, and that's why other institutions that invite him are wrong. It doesn't matter if he gets up and makes a fool of himself, as he did in Colombia when he said, in answer to a question, that there were no homosexuals in Iran. That's irrelevant. What's important is that by appearing before a great institution, he can go back home and say, you see, I can command the world stage. We need to isolate him. We need to marginalize him. We need the other people in Iran to recognize that he is an embarrassment to his own country. 2/3 of the people in Iran don't like him much. 2/3 of the people want a reformist government. The economy is a mess except for $120 oil. There are many vulnerabilities of this man. And we all know that he doesn't even run the country. That's the supreme leader. And we know also that the rest of the Iranian leadership is also anti-Israeli. But by singling out Ahmadinejad, who is after all the president, i.e. the chief of state, if not the most powerful person in the country. By the way, that's also true in Russia, as you may have noticed. The real power is not President Medvedev, who's also in New York today. The real power is Vladimir Putin. But by singling out Ahmadinejad on this issue, we send a signal to the whole Iranian leadership that their ties to Hezbollah and Hamas and their efforts to promulgate this kind of stuff will not sell internationally. And so I applaud tremendously this group. Again, I stress, there's no way you can stop him from talking at the UN General Assembly. But to give him other fora just don't make any sense to me. We want to generate an intense debate, starting here and now, over Tehran's statements towards Israel, recognizing always that what you say today can turn into a policy tomorrow. We want them to understand that they too could face the isolation that comes from actions from something like the International Criminal Court. Another reason why all of us in this room should tell everyone in the international community, particularly in the Security Council, not to defer Bashir's indictment. Think of the effect in Tehran if we defer Bashir's indictment or we allow it to happen. It's a very tricky technical issue and there are a lot of nuances, but in the end, we shouldn't let a person advocating genocide off the hook. And what happens to Bashir will affect the attitude in Tehran. We need to use all international pressure to put on Tehran. And again, I want to conclude with the simplest point, just 2 words. Words really matter. And I congratulate my friend Dory Gold, who was my counterpart as Israel's ambassador to the United Nations when I served there. I want to congratulate